This is David De Cristofaro. I just wanted to offer a verbal narrative to a cool project for the topic Artists Engaging in Science, the subject Metric Data and Analytics in Music. Just to give kind of a brief introduction or overview of what we mean by metric data and analytics in music, some background is just over the course of the past 50 years especially, we've seen huge advances and acceleration in digital technology that started with advances in computing. As that's progressed, we've seen advances also in physical storage devices that have become gradually more and more consolidated, integrated, and accessible and affordable to consumers. More streamlined, more efficient, and more affordable and accessible to everyday people. And so now, as a result of that revolution in digital technology, people in countries all around the world, first world countries, third world countries, have access to the internet, to social media, streaming media platforms, thanks to the accessibility, efficiency, and affordability of mobile device technology. This is a really big step for companies in terms of reaching people all around the world. When platforms go online that build big databases of users, some of them are now decentralized in the sense that they exist digitally, and whether or not those companies have a big office building somewhere is kind of optional at this stage. So there's a lot of companies that just basically exist online. And so they're able to offer services, resources, things like that at an affordable rate to consumers without the burden of production costs or at a scaled down and much more efficient model. A decentralized platform can exist in a digital space without a physical one as a base of operations. That can reduce the costs for a lot of things. So any business that spends less on its operations gets to reap more of the benefit of the profits it yields at a lot less money than they would normally cost to run their business. Now, in terms of a digital commerce on a global scale, that means companies can have reach in all parts of the world, in all different type of countries. Here you see a map. All the red in this map indicates countries where Netflix is accessible and usable and where Netflix is enjoyed by consumers. I might be surprised to see just how much of the globe it's available in. As for the topic of data, data really became popular in the late 1800s thanks to mathematicians like Charles Babbage and folks that really dialed in to the potential use of punch cards in the context of computing machinery. It also then took off with the U.S. Census. In the late 1800s, the country was looking for a more efficient way to gather and process our census information. And so by 1890, the first punch card for the census, which you see there on the left of the slide, was introduced. And not long after that, in the early 1900s, punch cards were introduced for computing. And you might recognize the style of the punch cards because whether it's filling it in by pencil or punching it in using computers or machines, similar style coding cards have been used for voting, standardized testing, and then also for various computing functions early on in the development of computers as we know them today. In music, digital technology started to become popular in the 1980s. Up until the 60s and 70s, all the way going back to the early days of music, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the phonograph was still being developed and advanced and re-innovated. The vinyl record and record player were basically the standards as far as how music was consumed for the better part of about 70 years. When magnetic tape became popular in the 60s and 70s, eventually that gave way to digital technology. First, they introduced it by digitally programming magnetic tape. Then eventually technology took off in the form of MP3 files. And within that coding exists the information of music. Digital music was a new technology introduced in the 1980s, being programmed into magnetic tape, and then gradually developing the compact disc, which was programmed with binary code using lasers. Over time, the digital technology took on a computer file form that we now know as the MP3. The MP3 became very popular and took off with the peer-to-peer file sharing service Napster that appeared in the end of the 1990s, beginning of the 2000s. Then, when the MP3 format needed to be legitimized, Apple stepped up and introduced iTunes in 2001, and so that's where the MP3 then became the replacement, in a sense, for the CD, which was the primary form of consumption prior to that for music. Pandora, which is a internet radio service, took off shortly thereafter and built a very large customer base, offering a freemium service. And then eventually Spotify and other streaming platforms came along that would take digital music to a new level of accessibility for people all around the world. Right along the same timeline as the uprising in some of the digital technologies online, as far as making music available to fans and consumers, there was a social movement online as well that started with MySpace, then translated to social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. That changed the way that people interact with, learned about, and engaged bands and artists, as well as in how they access their content. During this era, Pandora introduced the Music Genome Project. This effort by Pandora that started in 2001, around the same time that iTunes launched, is an integral research project that collects all these data points on each song and gives structure to them so that they can be compared with one another, assessed, evaluated, distinguished between, and using algorithms can identify based on an individual user of Pandora's listening habits what other type of music they may want to listen to as well. The Genome Project was the first of its kind, and to this day got us a very big jump on a lot of the algorithms that have now become much more commonplace in other platforms. You may recognize the concept of algorithms being used in a streaming media service to make recommendations to its users about what else it is that they might enjoy. And that's because Netflix employs the same type of process in their service. As a matter of fact, the television and film industries have actually gone through a lot of the same parallels as the music industry before the music industry went through them. For example, in the 1980s, you may remember a very common occurrence at the time. People would just take screwdrivers to the back of cable boxes and tweak them so they could get free HBO. So the same thing ended up becoming a similar problem in music later on when people would start copying CDs. People would also take camcorders that had been developed as consumer commodities into movie theaters and film movies and then sell them as bootlegs. So these are things that the film and television industry dealt with in advance of the music industry dealing with piracy, both in the form of digital downloads, CD copying, a number of other things that they encountered along the way. Nowadays, digital data is derived from internet search engines, social media, streaming platforms, mobile apps, by companies like Google, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, apps like Bandsintown, Shazam, a lot of household names, a lot of names that we've become very familiar with on account of them being in app form on our mobile devices, in addition to some of them being our go-to programs when we open up our laptops every day. At this point, each mobile device that you're holding in your hand is a little computer, and each one of those programs and apps that you have on there integrate with one another to provide a ton of data that can be mined by analytic engines that use algorithms to measure some of your consumption habits and behaviors and activities online. You'll notice that when you use these apps, they often offer a login with Facebook feature. The reason for that is everybody's on Facebook. So when you use that, you're integrating your platforms, and in doing so, you're integrating your data. When you integrate your data, it makes all your user habits on all those other platforms available to one another so that they can better get to know your user behaviors. That's why when you're online, whether you're on Facebook or whether or not you're searching on Google, you'll notice occasionally that you might be on a site that has advertisements that pop up Those advertisements are tailored to your user habits and preferences, and they're making recommendations based on those. The news stories that pop up in your news feed often are based on topics relative to your search patterns and user behaviors online. Spotify uses algorithms now to make suggestions for you based on the music that you listen to. An important difference to understand in the backdrop of Spotify and Pandora is in how they license their music. Pandora pays what's called a statutory license, which is the same type of a license that terrestrial radio stations pay to be able to play all the music that they play. Spotify licenses directly from record labels, so they negotiate specific licensing agreements with artists directly or with record labels directly. Now, up until recently, before the Beatles were on Spotify, you'll notice that that was one of the distinguishable differences. Still evident in the case of Adele, who withheld her music from her new album from Spotify. You can hear those artists in rotation on the internet radio service Pandora, which pays the statutory licensing that radio stations play to cover their licensing ability to play those songs. But you can't build customized user-centric playlists on Pandora, whereas with Spotify, who licenses directly with the artists and labels, allows you to do that. One of the reasons Spotify has managed to be so successful and make so much money and to not only stick around but thrive in the time that it's been on the digital landscape is that they are able to offer data that is much more direct and user-centric than a service like Pandora is, which is a little bit more in alignment with the vagueness of its licensing in that it's an overhead. It's not as direct as consumer behaviors on Spotify are. Playlists on Spotify potentially can be a little bit more tailored and unique to your experience. Nowadays, we have companies that are willing to crunch all these numbers for us. That makes the jobs of people in music, whether you're the artist, a record label, or a marketing company, a little bit easier in terms of figuring out, where to concentrate efforts. There's companies like Next Big Sound that collect all the metric data from your sales information, social media activity, interactivity by the people on your platforms, your live events and concerts, people in attendance, your usage patterns, behaviors, things like that. Consolidates all this information into readable charts, statistics, and demographic information that can be really helpful if you're trying to plan tours or even your set list to identify what songs people like. Marketing campaigns that are tailored specifically to your demographic of music fan if you're an artist or band, as well as when to do your album releases and advantages that you can have there for greater success in them.
Personal engagement demonstrates a direct value for the fan and results in a stronger sense of community within their fan base and a continued desire to invest in the artist. The direct-to-fan relationship that is developed through targeting the fans who invest the most in the artist based on metric averages of engagement and revenue per fan. The direct and real-time reach of online channels and mobile app technology offers artists an unprecedented exposure to casual fans that they can convert into super fans by offering combinations of free and paid options that unlock accessibility to exclusive content and personal engagement through a tier system of special offers. This monetizes the tiers in a way that's profitable to a sustainable career while enhancing the experience of the fans who invest in the artist the most. To truly love music is to love every part of it, and marketing offers a whole outlet of various combinations of opportunities in digital marketing initiatives and in creative tech solutions that enhance the direct-to-fan relationship and also improve the economic efficiency of how we do business in music to be able to express creativity and enhance the relationship with artist fans.
For music fans, there's a lot of really neat things available through these services because really what all these algorithms and programs are doing is learning about you so that they can make recommendations, new bands, new artists, new songs that are tailored to your likes, to your preferences, to the things that you enjoy. If you're a fan of music and you band crush every once in a while and fall in love with a band, there's never been a greater time to be a music fan. You can discover bands through virtually any type of social media platform now. You can learn about them at an expedited rate, and you can learn about their music and consume their music at an unprecedented level. Nowadays, if I am on a platform, or if I am out and about at a restaurant, or if I'm in a bike shop or a coffee shop and I hear a song that catches my ear, I can open my phone, use my Shazam app to identify the song, check out its lyrics if I want, identify the artist or band, and it can be a band from anywhere in the world. It could be a indie band from the Pacific Northwest that in the past you may have never heard about or discovered unless you attended a house show. After learning about who it is, you can then familiarize yourself with them by getting to know them through their social platforms, getting to know their catalog through Spotify or YouTube, and learning their songs. And then you can find out when they're touring or when they're playing nearby. You can purchase tickets directly through one of those apps I mentioned. You can even scout what their set lists might look like through websites like Setlist FM, where different tour stops, they have set lists posted for those, and you can go kind of get an idea of what type of set lists they're playing, which songs they're playing in them. And then you can use one of your favorite streaming platforms to customize a playlist based on those set lists to kind of get ready for the show, get an idea of what songs are going to be performed so you can familiarize yourself with them, really get hyped up for the show and have an incredible experience. So really, digital technology is kind of re-innovated, but also streamlined and expedited the band crush to make it even more of a complete and all-encompassing experience for the fan. So in the end, digital technology and data and music has created an opportunity for fans, artists, bands, labels, and other entities within the music business, all to be able to enjoy music more thoroughly and efficiently, reducing unnecessary work to discover music, create music, or distribute music. Also at a reduced cost, reduction of distractions, providing artists, bands, labels, companies, and fans with the best opportunity to experience music the best way that they can. It creates a much fuller spectrum and scape of engagement and interactivity to get the best possible results out of a musical experience. And that is a general overview of data and music.
Thank you.